Hello, I'm Steven,
And I'm Aaron.
and we have just seen The
The
Monkey, a new film out in theaters right now starring Theo James, Tatiana Maslany, and it is directed by Osgood Perkins. So, between Gretel and Hansel, Longlegs, and now this, I'm starting to think that Osgood Perkins is just not my cup of tea. Because this was terrible. This was one of the worst films of the year.
Okay, I did not realize that he directed Gretel and Hansel.
Yeah, he didn't write it, but he directed it.
That's pretty interesting. I actually kind of think that movie's okay. I think the visuals and music are pretty outstanding in that, but the story and everything else is not that great. I liked Longlegs. Did you not like Longlegs?
I thought the first half of Longlegs felt like a collection of stock plot lines from a bunch of movies we've seen before in the past, but also just leftovers from better movies like Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs has its fingerprints all over Longlegs, but I thought it was kind of redeemed in the second half. But I think it has more to do with just the performances keeping that movie aloft. Micah Monroe, Alicia Witt, and especially Nicolas Cage as the titular Longlegs, I think, are the things that keep that thing afloat. It kind of falls apart for me at the end when it becomes a giant exposition dump, because I guess Osgood Perkins is afraid of letting people put things together through just the visuals, which is also the case here in The Monkey, where things that are shown to us visually are then explained again through needless narration and exposition.
Well, yeah, another problem I think with kind of the third act of this is that it's not much of a reveal.
No.
I felt like it was pretty obvious, like what was behind everything from, the end of the first act. I will say I guess I liked Longlegs more than you did, and I feel like I definitely liked this one more than you did because while I don't think this movie is very good, The Monkey, I do like some things about it, and I kind of like the idea behind it.
Yeah, you and I definitely have a difference of opinion on this because we were at the screening watching this yesterday, and you were laughing quite a bit throughout this thing. I did not laugh once, not
Yeah.
even a titter or a chuckle.
Well, I kind of like the idea behind it and the way they explore it. Like the movie revolves around death and the idea of death and death as a cruel thing, as a freak thing, as a sudden thing, an unexpected thing. Kind of death in all manner, and when and how it comes for you. And a lot of people would tackle that subject matter with more of a dramatic angle, but he treats it kind of like a farce, like a comedy. And I think that's a really interesting way to do it, especially for like learning about Osgood Perkins and kind of his background with his parents, the way they died. I don't know, something about finding the comedy and the joke in just cruel fate is was really kind of like darkly twisted and funny to me.
You said someone might have treated this with a more dramatic approach. Yeah, someone did. His name was Stephen King, the guy who wrote the short, which
Yeah.
I read. I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to you that the short story does not feature any of the Final Destination style killings that this movie does. All that's is Osgood Perkins bullshit.
Well, I think it's kind of Final Destination in so much as it's just like a series of death scenes kind of all stitched together. But the death scenes here are much more like sudden and out of nowhere and freaking nature kind of deal where Final Destination, it really is like a giant like mousetrap style contraption that ultimately results in somebody's horrible demise. I felt like here it was more about the comedic timing, and I guess like the comedy worked for me for the most part. I think the biggest problem is that since it is based on a short story, the movie does run out of gas probably about halfway through or an hour into it.
Yeah, I was getting pretty tired by the time the third act was rolling around, just getting ready for this to end. And the thing about the comedy is that I didn't find it funny, and this movie is so convinced that it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. It felt like Osgood Perkins was sitting there in the screening jackhammering his elbow into my ribs saying, "Isn't this so goddamn funny?" No, Oz, it's not. It's really not.
I didn't feel that strongly about it. I think, like I said, it does kind of wear thin, like, after an hour. I feel like this probably should have been 80 minutes.
It goes without saying, I would have preferred the film had the same dramatic approach as the short story. I really did not like this Final Destination style approach. One of the deaths that happens in the movie is a lady whose head, like, ignites in a pillar of flame, which I know you were cackling away at. I did not find it funny, and in part because the lady's screams of agony were so half-assed. She did not actually sound like she was in pain, and if I feel like the actor doesn't believe it, I don't believe it.
I don't know. I think that kind of adds to, like, the silliness and over-the-top nature of the movie. They are not trying to be really serious in any kind of way when it comes to the death scenes. It's kind of weird because the movie's a tonal mishmash. Like, in between the death scenes, it does play things fairly straightforward because the movie is about these twin brothers who, as kids, experience some trauma when their parents are or their mom is killed by this monkey that's left behind by their father.
It's the old toy with the monkey with the banging cymbals, only it's a drum in this. You twist the key on its back, it bangs the drums, and then a calamity ensues. Somebody dies in a horrific, gruesome, over-the-top, absurd manner. In the short story, it was a lot more straightforward, like the cat gets run over by a car, or the childhood friend falls out of the treehouse. In this, it's a harpoon gets shot across the room and goes into somebody's stomach, and then it retracts, taking its intestines out with him.
I think there's two ways to do this movie. One is the more serious, dramatic take where you really explore, like trauma and death and how people respond to it. Because that essentially is what this movie is how people respond to death when it occurs around them. Some people are kind of unfazed by it. Some people just live with it the rest of their life in a depression. Some people try to, take control over it or weaponize it in some kind of way. There's a lot of different responses to death, and I think that was, like, a really interesting thing about this movie. Like I said, it just goes on for way too long, and it does eventually stop being funny because as over-the-top and silly as it is, it does kind of become too silly at a certain point.
Did you find any of the characters compelling or engaging to watch? Because there's a point I'm going to make with this in a second.
I feel like I liked the performances more than I liked the actual characters.
Yeah, performance-wise, everyone's doing fine. I don't blame the actors.
I like the kids. In the beginning, Tatiana Maslany shows up playing the mother. I thought she was actually pretty good. And again, her comic delivery I thought was very well done. She has a whole kind of short monologue about death and how, death is coming for us all and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Some people go peacefully, some people go out in unbelievably cruel, agonizing ways.
Yeah, I like that whole conversation. Osgood Perkins even shows up in kind of a cameo as their uncle.
Yeah, and he meets a gruesome demise. It's one of the few scenes that almost got a chuckle out of me.
Yeah,
it didn't quite get there.
That's one of the few deaths that you don't actually really see in the movie. You just kind of like, well, I mean, you do eventually see it, but the way it's revealed is very funny how it's edited. But back to the performances. When they're adults, Theo James plays the twin brothers, and I thought he was really good in the movie. He plays his character just kind of like disassociated because the way he reacts to death is to isolate himself away from other people, and he sacrifices his relationships because he's just so scared that something horrible is going to happen to the people he cares about.
Most critical of all is his son, who he's estranged from, and a lot of the movie is him paired up with his son trying to basically reconnect. Well, he wants to keep his son out of harm's way, and he's trying to keep himself distant, but inevitably the two have to grow closer together over the course of the film. Problem is, it never feels sincere. This movie is so thoroughly steeped in snark and irony, and that is true of their relationship as well. It never feels genuine. It always feels just snarky. They never have a tender moment, I feel, in the movie, and this is the point I was going to make. You could have a movie like this that has these absurd, ridiculous killings that's over the top and not even supposed to be taken even remotely seriously, and I guess you're even supposed to be entertained by the absurdity of the killings, but still have characters that are compelling and even kind of sincere. And that was the case with Terrifier, Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3. Those movies are an absurd glorification of cruel, gratuitous, bloody violence, but Sienna Shaw is an awesome character, and her relationships with her family, and particularly her sister in Terrifier 3, actually do feel sincere. They actually do try to create these tender moments between them that get me emotionally invested in her character. Not true of this film. I didn't give a shit about anyone in this film.
Yeah, it's kind of the biggest problem with it, along with the length of it. Like, the third act doesn't really work because it is just a giant exposition dump, kind of capped off with another silly death that's not as funny as it was earlier in the movie because it's just kind of worn on too long. And the central kind of conflict between the two characters is really not all that well developed and doesn't really go to anywhere interesting. It kind of has a nice little ending where the characters kind of accept the situation they're in. You know, they kind of think about death in a different way and move on with their life in hopefully a more positive manner. But yeah, it's the movie's too long. Third act doesn't work. Relationship doesn't work. So some of the times when they do try to be more sincere and tender, they just don't play. But it is a lot of fun for a little while. At least it was for me. I was very much into the concept from the beginning, and the way they treat death just like a really insane joke. But it's a joke that goes on for too long.
On the plus side, the monkey prop is actually quite good.
Yeah.
I do like the way it seems to subtly change expression depending on how it's lit. I wonder if they had interchangeable heads for the monkey, or if they literally did just open the mouth slightly in different shots and then light it differently. And the eyes definitely do move in some of the shots.
I don't know that they move. I think it's just kind of one of those situations where it feels like it's always watching you.
Just trickery.
Yeah, the eyes are...
Like the painting that always seems to follow you.
Yeah, the eyes are like almost like sunken in the back of the actual like eyeball on the monkey. So when you photograph it from different angles, it kind of looks like he's, looking at you depending on where your camera's pointed at it. It's very well done.
Also, the sound design I thought was really good on it. Whenever the drumstick rotates in its hand, that winding sound, and every time the monkey bangs on those drums, the sound it makes is aggressive and threatening, and I thought that was very effective. It turns out you actually can make a kind of threatening presence out of an inanimate object.
Yeah,
a children's toy.
It's kind of like the creepy doll thing, but here it actually does work.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shots in the whole movie is like a long zoom shot of the monkey where it goes from like total darkness to this extreme close up of the monkey's face where it's kind of lit in kind of a bluish light. And the way the face is just kind of revealed to the camera over a short period of time is just very well done and pretty effective as far as like creepiness goes.
The prop might be just a tad too perfect, though, because in the short story, it is described as having yellowed with age, and it has like bald spots on it on places, and the fur is very matted and worn. But that's a minor thing. That doesn't really matter.
I don't think that really matters at all.
It's a good-looking prop, and it's effectively shot. That's it. That's all the praise I got is for the monkey toy.
I like the comedy for a while. I like the variety of deaths and how silly and ridiculous they are. There's just too much, and also not enough.
So what is your final number rating on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would give it just a decent like 6 out of 10. I wouldn't watch it again. I had a good time for most of the movie, but it really kind of loses steam in the final like 30 minutes or so, and I'm just like, okay, let's wrap it up and finish this off, because there's really not much story clearly that you guys have to tell. So But while it's funny, to me, it was really funny. I laughed out loud quite a few times.
Yeah, this is a 4 out of 10 for me. This is one of the worst movies of the year. And when I was ranking this movie among the films I've seen this year, I realized that I had to lower my rating for Flight Risk, which evidently I gave a 5. I don't know what I was smoking. Flight Risk is a worse made movie and just a worse movie in general. I hated this more. I actually kind of enjoyed Flight Risk because that movie was just stupid. It was almost so bad it's good,
For what it's worth, I think I would rather watch Flight Risk again because there is like the so bad it's good aspects. This I think I would just get bored with since I already know the jokes.
Yeah, but with this, it's technically better made, but I had a worse time with it. But Flight Risk, I think, is a objectively worse movie, so I had to knock Flight Risk down a notch and give it a 4, which is what I give this to. Awful movie. Don't see it.
Go see it, but be warned about the third act.